beginning of the webinar. So welcome. Thank you so much for being here with us for the 5th session of the School Garden Leadership Training Series. This month, we're calling it the Seed Saving Social, and we're covering topics ranging from spring crop selection, seed saving, volunteer recruitment, and parent engagement. So let's get started. For the most optimal experience in the Zoom space today, we definitely recommend that you exit full screen mode and then you enter into the side-by-side speaker view, and you can find that option in the top corner of your screen. So when you go into side-by-side speaker view, you'll see the PowerPoint on one side and then my face on the other, and you can toggle back and forth to make one bigger or smaller, just according to your preferences. And we ask that you will stay off camera for really the duration of this presentation. But when we do our activity together, then you can turn your cameras back on. But just to reduce distractions, turning cameras off in the rest of the time is recommended. And also muting microphones is definitely appreciated so we can avoid interruptions. But we encourage you to open up the participant screen on the bottom and click on the chat icon so you can ask questions in the chat and just participate with the other folks here on the call in the chat. Again, welcome. We just would love to create a network among school garden leaders in Florida. And so that's one of the reasons why we're doing this. And so we would just ask you to take a little bit of time to introduce yourself in the chat, writing your name, your organization or school that you're associated with, the county where you're located, and then anything that you did in the fall of 2021 that you're really proud of, an accomplishment that you made in your garden. And we also want to just pause and acknowledge that the work that we do in gardening and just living every day is connected to the peoples past and present who have historically inhabited this land, the indigenous and native peoples. So also adding the land acknowledgement, just to mention who that people group is, who has that kind of ancestral tie to the land where you are, is definitely appreciated. And we have included a native land map in the chat for you to just deepen your awareness about this topic. So because we are learning about each other and making those connections, we also wanted to introduce ourselves as the co-host of this webinar series. So this series is hosted in partnership between Florida Agriculture in the Classroom and UF IFAS Extension Family Nutrition Program. So Florida Agriculture in the Classroom is a statewide nonprofit organization funded by the specialty license plate, the Ag Tag, and Florida Ag in the Classroom connects kids to healthy food and Florida agriculture through educational resources, teacher professional development, grants, and other farm to school programming. They have a vision to ensure that every student in pre-K to 12th grade is aware of and appreciates agriculture and natural resources in Florida. So you can see there on the left side some of the services they offer that include educational resources, some really awesome grants and awards. And then we've also listed the contact information for the staff on the slide as well. And I do encourage you to reach out directly to the Florida Agriculture in the Classroom staff. They are really happy and excited to support you on your gardening journey. And I know from experience that they're wonderful to work with. So I'm sure you'll enjoy connecting. And also the organization I represent is the UF IFAS Extension Family Nutrition Program. We are one of the SNAP education providers in Florida, and we have been providing free nutrition education to limited resource families in Florida since 1996. We work in 40 counties across the state, and our goal is to help limited resource families access more nutritious food choices on a budget and adopt healthier eating and physical activity habits, through that nutrition education, but also through promotion of healthy eating choices and just increasing that access to healthy foods. So gardening, as I'm sure you all know, is a really fantastic way to do that. And that's why we're here together. So the goal of this entire series is to equip you all as garden leaders for long-term success, to strengthen your garden programs across these 3 spheres of sustainability, which include leadership skills, curricula connections, and gardening knowledge. And these 3 spheres are the threads that we're weaving together through each session of this series, just incorporating a little bit of each every single time so that you're built up in every area and can connect the garden to the classroom, really engage with all the people in your school community and feel good about what you're growing and have a productive crop. And today we're specifically doing that by covering the topics of spring crop selection, providing a brief overview of seed saving, conducting this fun germination test activity, and having a demonstration of make and takes, to some different lessons and ideas for activities of what you could do with your students. And then finally, hearing from a really knowledgeable volunteer and actually parent garden leader about how to engage parents and volunteers to make your garden program thrive. So we'll do all of that from 3:30 to 4:30, and then the last half an hour of our time together will be dedicated to question and answer and networking. So as we're going along in the presentation, if you could just put any questions that you have into the chat, we will address them at the very end. And we have a new feature this time around, which includes a compiled document of links. So throughout the webinar series, we've been posting a lot of links in the chat, but this time around, we've actually combined all of those links into just one document, and we will periodically post that document link in the chat so you can access that kind of compiled list all at once. So we are just going to move right along into spring crop selection. The first thing to keep in mind about spring crop selection is thinking about planning what you're going to grow. So this kind of is a brief overview of the topics that we covered in our October webinar. So if you haven't gotten a chance to watch that, if you didn't join us in October, if you didn't look at the recording, or maybe if you have less experience planting with students, I definitely recommend going back and watching that full webinar. But just as a brief review, looking at the planting calendars and assessing seasonality before deciding what crops you're going to grow is a good first step. And there are lots of different planting calendar resources out there. Some of them are more localized to your region, others are statewide, others, maybe even are nationwide. But they will give you the information you need to know about what different crop types and varieties are best to plant in your location. And so this one that we're featuring is from the Florida Vegetable Gardening Guide from UF-IFAS Extension, and it has the great features of, what to plant in different regions of Florida, when to plant them, the days to harvest, the plant spacing information, and a whole lot more on this table. So this is accessible in the Google Drive folder. And just to kind of make it a little bit more simple, we have provided some recommendations of what to plant in February in each of the Florida regions, North, Central, and South. So we've particularly identified these crops because they're good to plant in February, and you'll be able to have a harvest before you leave for summer break. And you see that we've highlighted beans and cilantro on these lists, and that's because we're thinking about seed saving today. And a good way to take the knowledge that you gain from this session is by planting beans and cilantro to save seed from. So we'll go into a little bit more detail about that after covering the seed saving content, but I just wanted to flag that beans and cilantro are a great kind of way to start seed saving, to get your feet wet in what seed saving is. Pretty straightforward, and anyone can do it. So that could be a journey that you go on with your class or with your students, the gardening participants that you have, to plant these crops in February for a later seed harvest down the line. Another planting resource that we didn't show last time, but we wanted to highlight now is this Plant Now online tool from UF IFAS Extension. And it's a really neat tool in which you just enter your zip code, and that will give you a list of crops that you can plant during that month. And it also supplies a little kind of fact sheet about what you need to know if you decide to plant that crop. So I'm going to navigate over to that website, and I think that website link should be in the chat box, so you all can feel free to navigate there with me. But if I could have a zip code of someone participating today, if one of our organizers could unmute and tell me a zip code coming in through the chat, I'll write it in here and we can see what you should plant now where you are.
I hear 32310, Kelly.
32310. All right. Okay, so in 32310 in January, you can plant arugula and beets and broccoli, all sorts of things. So it's super nice. You just have this big list of what you could plant right now. You can change the month to whatever month you'd like, but we're talking about February because we've just reached the end of January. It's reloaded and the list looks pretty similar. But I think peppers were added. So let's say you want to plant peppers right now in February, and you got all of this great information. So we wanted to share this resource because it's just 2 clicks of a button, and you know what you're going to plant, which is super neat. So can you all just confirm that you're seeing the PowerPoint?
Yes, that's good.
Okay, perfect. Well, moving right along, the next kind of component of spring crop selection and spring planting is to make a plan. So, throughout the process of selecting your crops, you also want to ensure that you have enough space in your garden to plant what you've selected, and you know where each crop is going to be placed and planted in the garden. So it's really wonderful to involve your students in that planning process. And a helpful tool to do so is this lesson in Gardening for Grades from Florida Agriculture in the Classroom called Planet Map It. And this allows the students to think through the various factors that you need to consider when making a planting plan. So they can think about how big does this plant actually get? How much space does it take up? What kind of care does it require? Are we able to plant the certain crop in the garden? And so, before you even go out and start planting in the garden, in the classroom, you can make that plan. The students are engaged, they're involved in it. And you're also covering a lot of, important Florida state standards along the way. Another strategy for planting is square foot gardening. And so as you can see in our photo, square foot gardening is pretty straightforward. You simply divide your raised bed into square feet by adding these dividing lines. A physical division by using a nylon string or a thin board, or I've even seen PVC pipe or bamboo used for this purpose, is really helpful to outline those squares to make it evident where they are. And this helps to use the garden space more efficiently, ensure that your plants are appropriately spaced in the garden, that they have enough room to grow and thrive and they're not crowding each other out, but also that you're not planting the plants too far away. As kind of a strategy for outdoor classroom management as well, you can assign a square foot for each student to plant. So maybe you have radishes to plant that day, and you can give the student 16 radish seeds. They plant the radish in the square, and then it's done, and each student gets to participate. Square foot gardening is also a really helpful way to involve math in the garden. Anytime you're doing plant spacing, that's an opportunity to think about division or a different calculation. So we did want to share that tool. And Some resources that we have made available for you in the Google Drive are the Square Foot Garden planning tool and also the Square Foot Garden activity. So this grid is just a paper grid that you can outline and write out your plan ahead of time with the references for how many plants go in each square according to the inches that they need to be spaced apart. And the activity, this lesson is really nice because it allows the students to make their garden planting plan using construction papers and pom-poms in the classroom. So before you even go outside, you make that plan, you know where everything is going to go. So that way they have the concept of square foot gardening in mind before going out in the garden. They do a practice round and then you can go and actually plant your plants later. So hope that you can make good use of those resources. They are in the Google Drive, and hopefully that will facilitate a really smooth planting process that is appropriate seasonally here as we enter February. And now I am excited to transition over into the seed saving portion of this session. And we have two guest contributors and a guest presenter here today. So I'd like to introduce Mac Lessig, who is the UF IFAS Extension Manatee County Community Gardens Program Assistant, and he has extensive experience in seed saving and runs seed libraries and does all sorts of great things in Manatee County. And we also have a contribution from the founder and director of Miami Seed Share, Corinne Mariposa. But first, I will hand it over to Mac.
All right, can y'all hear me okay?
Yeah, perfect.
Perfect. And the control of the slides is controlled by another, is that correct?
Yes, I will keep moving slides.
Perfect. All right, so thank you for that introduction. Just to reiterate, my name is Mac, like the truck. Macaroni is what the kids call me. That's fine. If y'all want to call me that too, I'm cool with that. I'm here today to talk to y'all about basic seed saving, just literally in a nutshell. Seed saving is the intentional act of growing, processing, and storing seeds, right? It has a lot of benefits, and we've been doing it for thousands of years. If you can think about back in ancient times, we've been selecting and choosing and saving seeds for really most of the crops that we eat now since that time. We've been choosing leaf size, we've been choosing fruit shape, we've been choosing taste, color, hardiness, disease resistance, all of those things we've been doing as people for millennia. So it's not something new, but the concept may be new for those of you who have not gardened before or have not even attempted to try and save seed. It's done for several reasons, and in my findings, economic was one of the top contenders. So, you know, buying seeds can be expensive. If you're buying a lot of seeds, that can be expensive. Many varieties or different kinds, those things add up. So saving seeds kind of mitigates that cost. There's cultural value in seed saving. So a lot of these varieties are tied to certain cultures, certain lands, certain peoples, and they have a story to tell. And that story should be told in the planting process. So when you're working with these kids with specific varieties, for instance, the fish pepper, you know, is one that's tied to Black communities in the Mid-Atlantic region. And that's a special pepper for those communities. So that would be one that has a story associated with it that should be shared during its planting. And then, of course, we have the preservation purposes. So there are many studies and statistics that say just in the last 50 years, we've lost a great diversity of tomato, melon, pepper varieties. You know, we're kind of condensing it, where in the past we've had hundreds and hundreds of varieties. So seed saving is a way that we can preserve these heirloom, these ancient varieties for the next generation. And just know anyone can be a seed saver, right? It's not rocket science. What I'm going to tell you today, some of these concepts might sound a little tricky, but you know, anyone can do it. So I want you to feel confident in that process. After this, we can work on, if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer then. So we can move on to the next slide if that's okay. Okay, so the first thing you need to know, or at least understand in the seed saving process, is the plant life cycle, right? And each species of plant has a certain life cycle. There are annual plants, and I'm sure you've heard these terms before. There are annuals, there are biennials, and there are perennial plants. And this is an important concept to understand for the act of seed saving, in particular, given that we live in Florida, especially for those of you who live in central and southern portions of the state where we don't get a cold winter, right? This weekend is the exception for us, but typically no cool weather that's going to trigger flowering in certain species. So the first and most common plants that you'll deal with, especially in a vegetable garden, are annuals. And annual plants complete their life cycle in one growing season. So not necessarily 1 year, but one growing season, right? They grow quickly, they flower, they set lots of seeds, and then they die, right? And they repeat that cycle over and over again. A good example of this would be cilantro or your garden beans. Those are annual plants that produce seeds quickly and they can be stored in an easy way. The next category would be biennial plants, and these ones can be a little tricky sometimes. So these plants require 2 growing seasons to complete their life cycle. So their first season is going to be lots of vegetative or foliar or leaf growth. So you'll see this nice rosette of pretty leaves, big robust growth, but no flowers yet. The second season, typically after winter or another environmental condition, will trigger them to flower. And at that time, they will produce seeds and then they will also die. In Florida, again, biennial plants are pretty tricky. So some examples would be carrots. A lot of the plants in the brassica family, except for your mustards, they seed reliably, but collards in Florida or kale or cabbage, they can be tricky sometimes without that environmental stimulation from winter. And then lastly, we have our perennial crops. And you can think of these as long-lived or many season plants that produce many fruits and many seeds. And these are really good for saving seeds if you're doing like fruit trees, for example. So some plants will require some special conditions. And a good example is a term called vernalization. Really, that's just a chilling effect or a cool effect or a winter. And again, that's what we're missing here in Florida. And so without that stimulation, without that winter cool, some of these plants will not be triggered into flowering. And so they're a little impractical to save seeds for, at least in our region. Okay, next slide. So the other thing that we have to grasp too is that seeds can be immature and mature. So right, in this pepper is a good example. When you go to the store, a lot of people will try and grow seeds from produce that they purchase. And a green pepper is one that I get asked a lot about. Green peppers are technically immature fruits. So they're the immature form, at least green bell pepper, of this particular variety. And we choose to eat that one, right? It's immature. But the seeds within that green pepper are typically not viable yet. You may get 1 or 2 that sprout, but typically they're not viable because the fruit is not mature in the botanical sense. Whereas the red and orange peppers that you see right next to them at the bell peppers, those ones are botanically mature. And those seeds tend to be viable if there's been no seed treatment from the grower. So for seed saving purposes, we encounter 2 phrases pretty frequently. One is at market maturity, and the other is after market maturity. I know it sounds a little confusing. Think about it when you go to the store to purchase something, right? So you're going to the store to buy produce. Let's use a cucumber, for example. So you go to the store, you buy a cucumber. That cucumber is green, right? It's hard, it's crisp, it's green. There's not a lot of seeds in it. They're kind of gelatinous, if you will. That would be an immature fruit, right? So its seeds are not ready until it's after the market maturity, right? After when someone would buy it. So the cucumber would need to change its color, for instance. So instead of being that nice crisp green, it's going to turn a yellow or a brown color. And that's when you can save seeds from it. Alternatively, tomatoes typically have viable seeds at market maturity. So we're buying them when they're mature, right? We're buying them when they're red. We're buying them when they're yellow. We're not normally buying green tomatoes. So if that is a little confusing, just let me know and I'll try and clarify that as we move on. But just know that viable seeds are harvested from botanically mature fruits. Those are the best ones to harvest seed from. Okay, next slide, please. So this one I get asked a lot too. So there are open pollinated plants. Sometimes you'll see that on the seed packet. So let's say you're shopping for vegetable seeds and you want to try something out and you see the term open pollinated or heirloom. Those plants, when isolated, okay, so I must state that. When they're isolated from others of the same species, so you're only growing one type of tomato, right? You're not growing many kinds of tomatoes, just one type. That's a form of isolation. When those fruits are mature and you're harvesting seed from them, those have predictable traits. So I'll use the example of only growing Cherokee purples. There's only Cherokee purple tomato in your garden. Those fruits are being pollinated by the bees and the other pollinators amongst themselves. There's no cross-pollination from another variety of tomato. We can say with high confidence that the seeds produced from those fruits will be Cherokee purple, right? That's the basic concept for open pollinated or heirloom plants. If we take another step back and look at a different example, this will explain what hybrids are. So let's say that you're growing Cherokee purple here, and directly next to them, you're growing green zebra tomatoes, right? They're in the same vicinity. There's no isolation. Those bees and pollinators will come and pollinate those flowers amongst the two varieties, and those fruits will produce seeds with unpredictable or unknown traits, right? We don't know what the cross between a green zebra and a Cherokee purple will create. So it's unpredictable, and these are not ideal for seed saving, at least as a beginner. Over time, if you're really into seed saving, you can begin to stabilize a hybrid. That's its own class. But for school garden and school garden leaders, sticking with one variety is probably the best way to get your feet wet with it, because you don't have to worry about crossing those two varieties. Okay, so again, stick with heirloom, one kind, keep those seeds as pure as possible, and then you can save them and know with high confidence that they will be what you say they are. Okay, next slide, please. So the processing of seeds is the next step, and it's typically broken down into 3 different types of processes. They're not very elaborate, right? Science has some really dry names. The first being dry processing. So this is the processing method that has no juice, no water, no moisture involved in it. This would be like your beans. When you're shelling beans, there's no juice involved, right? Your hands aren't getting juicy. They're very easy. So the dry processing is simply shelling beans. If we grew wheat here, you would be harvesting the wheat heads and blowing chaff off. There's just no moisture element to it. The second type of processing is wet processing. As the name implies, there's some juice here, right? It's juicy to cut into a watermelon. It's juicy to cut into some peppers. It's juicy to cut into cucumbers or an eggplant or something. There's some moisture element to it, right? And then the last processing method is wet processing with fermentation. And this picture does a really good job of illustrating one of the most common vegetables to save seed from that require fermentation, and that's a tomato. So what you would do, at least in this picture, is you would harvest your botanically mature tomato fruits, right? They've changed color from green to whatever the variety said. You're gonna harvest those seeds by squishing them into a bowl with water or a jar, and you'll let that sit for 3 to 4 days, right? It's gonna ferment, it's gonna break that jelly down. If you never noticed that tomato seeds have jelly on them, next time you cut a tomato open, look at that. There's like a gel layer around it. That prevents the seeds from sprouting within the fruit, right? So we're trying to break that down so we can store these seeds. So the fermentation does that. After the fermentation is complete, after a couple days, you rinse the seeds off, clean them, and then dry them. And then we move on to our next step. So next slide. Oh, wait, before we go, let me just mention this. So this is a little advanced, but I do want to mention, you want to check your seeds for insect activity. So if you're not familiar with insects, it could be a little tricky. Really, you're looking for small holes or sawdust-like particles. Okay, you're looking to see if there's been any weevils there to damage the seeds, and those seeds should be removed and disposed of or destroyed, unfortunately. Also diseases, and this one can be tricky as well, but if a seed looks off compared to the other seeds, don't save that one. Just use your best judgment. Those ones can go into the bin. Next slide, please.
Thanks, Mac. And just want to note that you have about a minute left.
Sure thing. So storing is really easy, y'all. Cool, dark, and dry, right? So you let them dry for 2 weeks, put them into a mason jar, store them on your shelf in the dark place or a plastic bag, and then you'll be good to go. Okay, next. Okay, and then lastly, the relevance in school gardens, right, while we're here today. So this is something that's very important for you to do in a school because it exposes the children to the whole life cycle of a plant, and it gives the kids the story behind the variety. So, right, they're not just plants. They're storytellers. They're telling someone something about where they came from. So that part is important to share with the children. Stick with annual or rapidly growing perennial plants. Okay, avoid biennial or plants that have special requirements for germination, either scarification, they need vernalization, any of those cool or hot, fire or anything to make them germinate. Stay away from them. And then designate an area in the school or your classroom as the seed bank, right, where you're going to store them cool and dry, and then keep good records of that. When you harvested them, when you're planting them out, did you test them for germination? And then you repeat the process in the next school year. And then pick species kids like to eat, right? We don't want plants they don't want, so pick the ones that they're keen on eating. And I think that covers it.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, of course.
Really appreciate that explanation. And I love that plants are storytellers. They definitely are. So I do want to highlight this video from Miami Seed Share, and we don't have time to watch the full thing right now, but it is a really fantastic visual for everything that Mac just explained. So you can see what it looks like when the seeds have insect damage. There's footage of that. You can see what it looks like, when the seed is ready for harvest. So definitely take a moment and look at that video. We've posted in the Facebook group, or come back at this slide. And like Max said, it is really great to start out by saving seeds from your annual plants, and the that dry method is the easiest way to do it. So we recommend that you start by saving bean seeds, because you can save seeds from just one plant. More is better, but sticking with that just one variety. Wait until the pods become very dry and hard, losing their color. Before storing them, make sure that those seeds are dry, that they are very hard so that your fingernail can't dent it, and store it in a cool, dry place, just like Max said. And cilantro or coriander is another great option for seed saving, because it teaches us that bolting, rather than being something to dismay over, is a great opportunity, and it can be an opportunity for seed saving. So when you see that your cilantro plant maybe got really hot, or has just started to grow up and make some flowers, let it flower, let it go to seed. And when the plant turns brown, you can just cut off that part and hang it in a papered bag, and let the seeds fall to the bottom to remove it from the chaff. And again, storing it after it's dried in a cool, dry, dark place. So mustard seeds, again, as Max said, they're really easy to, they generally set seed as well. So that's another example of making bolting into an opportunity for seed saving. So kind of with that, we're going to transition into our curricula connection portion and get ready to do our activity all together. So Tiffany Torres with Florida Agriculture in the Classroom and I will facilitate this portion. And now is the time to get out your germination kit activity. So I'm going to stop sharing the PowerPoint, and I would love if we all could do turn on your videos if you have your little kit, and we can look at each other in the gallery view so that we're all in the same proverbial room together doing this activity, setting up our germination kit. So just briefly, why are we germinating? Why is this important? The first purpose is just for the good of your garden. If you have old seeds sitting in your refrigerator or in the back closet somewhere, they might still be alive. So you don't necessarily need to toss it into the trash, but you could do a quick germination test with 10 to 20 of those seeds to find out if they're still viable, and save yourself some money. Just use that seed packet, plant it in the garden. The other great reason to talk about seed saving and to do germination tests is because, like Max said, you can learn about the entire life cycle of the plant and learn about the parts of the seed with your students, and even think about the factors that influence seed sprouting. So we sent in our mail kit this lesson plan for Yo Seeds Wake Up from Gardening for Grades. And this lesson, Yo Seeds Wake Up, allows the students to predict the factors that influence seed sprouting and actually design an experiment to test those factors. So they can draw the experiment setup and really set this germination test, maybe comparing what happens when you try to sprout seeds that are wet and try to sprout seeds that are dry. We know that we need to have our seeds that are wet for them to sprout. So that's what we're going to do today. So I hope you all have your cup of water, your paper towel, and your seeds. And I'm going to do this on a plate so you can see me. But I'm just going to put my paper towel on my plate. And then the idea is to evenly distribute. So we gave you 10 lima bean seeds from Publix. Actually, this is just from the grocery store, nothing fancy. So evenly distribute your seeds on the paper towel. I'm trying not to bend them too much. But once they're on there, all you need to do is take your cup of water and get it wet. So I'm using a spoon, and I am just going to put the water on the seeds. Maybe, okay, I just spilled a little bit, but that's how it goes. So there they are, all wet. And now the next step is to roll up your paper towel, your napkin, like a burrito, and make sure it's all good and wet. And so I've rolled mine up. You can see, oh, it's very wet, it's dripping. Hope you're having fun with this at home or in your classrooms, in your school, wherever you are. And I'm going to stick it inside of my plastic bag, and voila, we've set our germination test. So I definitely recommend leaving the bag open, unzipped, and then just folding it over, because molding can be a concern if it's too wet, if there's really no air. Air is also important for seeds to sprout. So just leave it in your bag. And I actually started a germination test with these lima beans on Friday. And you can see that they are growing. So we've got some awesome seed action. And the wonderful thing about this activity is you can see all of the parts of the plant inside of the seed. And you can see that the 10 seeds that I sprouted, actually all of them germinated, but this is another great way to incorporate math, calculating percentages, all that good stuff. So I recommend that you do this, and I'm excited for you to see your seeds sprouting as well. I hope that you have success. I hope your germination rate is strong. Tiffany, I'll just send the camera over to you to share about some of the activities you have.
Awesome, thanks, Kelly. So that was a great overview. Just wanted to highlight that activity is in Gardening for Grades. So this is available at FIITC.org. You can order a copy free to your school. And the next couple of things that we're going to cover today are mostly what we like to call make and takes. So these are quick extension activities, kind of craft oriented. They require a little bit of prep beforehand, but it's something that is hands-on and engaging that the students can do in addition to the more in-depth lessons like Kelly just went over. So the first one is seed necklaces. Maybe some of you have done this before. And if you have done any of these activities and you have any tips and tricks that you want to share, please type that into the chat, and you can definitely share later during our networking too. So I have my little display of materials here. So the first thing you will need for the seed necklaces is a little bag, and these can be found as jewelry bags at Joann's or any craft store. You will need some yarn that you're going to cut, some scissors, and a hole puncher, and then a little eyedropper to keep things neat and tidy. And you will also need some cotton balls. And in lieu of cotton balls, you can also use water beads. So these can be biodegradable, and you can order them from Amazon in a large kind of container for not very much money. And those are great because they come in different colors and they contain the water right there, and they break down over time. And then lastly, of course, you need some seeds. So for seed necklaces, I like to use, you can use radish seeds or really any kind of bean. I like to use mung beans. So this is also a good cultural connection. If you have any students from South or Southeast Asia, this might be culture relevant food. And mung beans are really great because they sprout very quickly. So the first thing you're going to do is either take that hole puncher and punch a hole in your bag, or what I like to do, because sometimes the hole puncher doesn't actually get all the way through the bag, is you can kind of snip a little triangle into the bag and fold it over on itself. And then that's going to make a little hole. And you want to make sure that you do this below where the Ziploc line is, so that there's air getting to the seed. And then after you have done that, you can go ahead and, I like to have the students do the yarn next. Put that through the hole, tie a little knot. And then we're gonna go ahead and put our, open it up, put our cotton ball in there. And lastly, you can put, I like to do 2 to 3 seeds directly in. And at this point, if you're using the different colored water beads, it's pretty cool because they can all represent different things that the seed might need. So really the point of this activity is to learn about germination, but also to learn about what plants need to grow. So each of those water color beads could represent a different thing. So what do plants need to grow? Sun, soil, water, and air. And there's a little song that I like to teach that goes along with that. So sun, soil, water, air, everything we eat and everything we wear comes from sun, soil, water, and air. And that's true for the most part. So a lot of our clothes, cotton, is an agricultural product, and all of the things we eat come from things that we grow, sun, soil, water, and air. So you can go through that, put the water beads in, put the water in. I'm not going to do that to make a mess right now. Just a couple drops. You don't want it, soaking too much, and then zip it up. And one of the extensions that I like to teach about too is, and with all these lessons, really, you can start to think about variables. So temperature and light would be the two that I like to talk about most. So I started both of these little guys on the same day. One of them I put in a light place, the one right here with the little sun on it. And you can kind of, a little hard to see, you can see they're starting to have their seed coats come off there. But this one actually was in a dark place. And you can see that it is sprouted, all of them sprouted quicker and more in depth. So that's pretty cool to see track the changes over time. And when you're doing this with the kids, you could also teach, think of yourself as a seed babysitter. So this is a way to teach, soft skills and life skills as well. You're really gonna have to take care of this thing. It's a real living plant that you are gonna be watching after and see what happens. So that activity is good for, I would say, kindergarten all the way up to 12th grade. You would be surprised how much the older population also like to do that activity. And next, I'm gonna go over garden in a glove. So garden in a glove, this is more maybe 1st grade through 3rd grade. And this is just a regular glove that you can get from your food service, probably your cafeteria. And what we like to do here is you want to make sure you're labeling, but this is basically a whole garden that you could plant. So you could plant up to 5 different seeds, or they could be all the same seed. And you're going to go ahead and label them. And when you're doing this, you might also want to think about, seasonality. So make sure that they're all things, if you do want to transplant them out afterwards into the garden, they're all things that are seasonally relevant. You also might want to think about direct seeding versus transplanting. So things that maybe might be a little more stressed if you then put them into the ground afterwards. And another cool thing you could do is have a writing extension with this. So you could cut out images of each of the vegetables that students are planting, and then they would be able to write the names of those vegetables themselves. So for this, again, you take cotton balls. I have some water here. And you would put them in the bottom with your seeds. I have a couple seeds here. Here's some radish seeds. And actually, it's the best practice to go ahead and put them in each of the fingers first before you do the cotton ball, so that they make sure to get down in the bottom. So I'm not going to do the whole thing right now, just because I want to save time and it's going to get a little messy. But I did do, for example, beans, peas, squash, lettuce, and radishes. And you can go ahead and take this and at the top, put the student's name on it. And again, think about extension, putting this on a window. If it's a cold time of year, maybe they would sprout at a different rate because there's both light and it's cold. And then if you put them somewhere else in the classroom, that might be darker and warmer. When I did this experiment earlier, I wanted to see actually, so the mung beans, how much they would sprout or not, depending on those light variations. So I put some in a paper towel, just like we did earlier, actually, 2 days ago, and in a wet paper towel. And then I haven't opened these up yet, but I did one method just on my counter. And then these were in a drawer that was next to it, my heating element. So I think these are going to be way more robust. Let's see. Oh yeah. You can, I hope that you can see some of those there.
Yeah, those are alive. They sprouted.
Making a mess, but it's fun. All in good learning. So the germination rate was much higher for those that were in the dark and in a warmer place than the ones that were just on my countertop here.
Mm-hmm.
And
Tiffany, we're just about at time.
Yeah.
Okay, so maybe we could review that in a future time, perhaps in our Q&A.
Sure, I'm happy to talk about the seed viewer and the Q&A.
Okay, perfect.
Great.
Well, thank you so much. I think it was really neat to see everything going on and just different ideas for how you can germinate seeds in different ways, different creative ways with your students. So here's just a summary slide of some of the activities that we shared. So you can access it later. And again, all of these links are in the link repository document in the chat. Something else to highlight is that January 29th is National Seed Swap Day. It's celebrated on the last Saturday of every January, and this could be a great time to organize an event with other school garden leaders in your region, or maybe even home gardeners or community gardeners to exchange the seeds that you're growing. And the Kids Garden community has a special seed saving and exchanging group online that you can join to learn even more. So definitely check that out if this is something you're hoping to do. And with that, I am so pleased to hand it over to Leslie Sachs, who is the volunteer garden lead at Pineview School, who is going to tell us about what she's doing and what the Pineview School is up to in regards to parent engagement and volunteer recruitment. So go right ahead, Leslie. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much. So I am a volunteer parent volunteer, and I manage the Pineview School Garden. We are located in Osprey, Florida, which is in Sarasota County. Pineview is a school that serves children from 2nd grade through 12th grade. So we have a wide range of students, and we have a fairly large campus. Our garden has always been run by parent volunteers. We actually are running it under our parent organization, which is called the Pine View Association, which is a 501c3 organization that provides funding and the general oversight of the garden. Our garden is very thankfully it's pretty large, and it's just expanded in the last month. So we have a good amount of space to work with. And I would say that our garden is very much part of our culture. So I have been running our garden since the beginning of this school year, coming in October. It had been sort of let go during the COVID time period because volunteers were not allowed on campus. Historically, it had been run more as sort of teacher designated plots. And that changed. I changed it to a student powered holistic garden management style. And so what's unique, I think, about our garden is that I hold the garden open every day for students to come in during their lunch and recess periods. And again, because we have sort of a large campus and a wide range of students coming in, it's not uncommon for me to have a third grade class come, because we're located right next to their playground, followed by middle school students coming in during their lunch recess period, followed by high school students that are coming in after their day ends, typically around 1 o'clock. So I keep a consolidated open garden hours to try and get all of these groups and students to come in whenever they would like to be in the garden. Teachers are always welcome in the garden, and I encourage them to make appointments. Because we try and do more specific activities, which I'll sort of get into how we do that and plan for it. And because it's student driven, all of the work is done by our students, and I generally just manage them. So I keep a daily list of tasks, and they come and check the message board to see what they should do and get started. And for things that we do over and over again, and I have to explain over and over again, I put together job aids so I can just hand them something, papers in these laminated pages where they can take a look and follow instructions. One of the things that I did when I took over this role was I put together a 5-year plan for our garden, which was rather ambitious and presumptuous at the time, but it was a really important tool because what it did was it shared both with our PVA leadership and our school administrators. This is the plan. This is where we're taking it. And here are very specific goals that we've set out for this year and then for the next 5 years. And that allows me to sort of keep an eye out for things that we might need in order to meet our plans and our goals in the future, particularly when I see things that would be really useful that someone is throwing out or that can be donated to us. It helps to have a clear roadmap of where we're going. And the example of my 5-year plan is here on the slide. So we can move on. So I've been asked to talk about parent engagement and volunteer engagement generally in the gardens. And that's something that I can understand for every school is going to be a little bit different based on your model and what you need in your garden. So in our garden, I have a steady supply of helping hands. So I'm never short of labor to work in the garden. I may be short on resources, but I always have people who come in who want to help because students are there all the time. But in order to engage parents, I do need things from time to time like materials and resources. So putting the word out of what we need and holding specific supply drives are a really great idea. And just listing them out. I keep a running list on my phone. In my notes tab of things that we need. I also keep a list in my garden notebook, and I have an open call out for parents who I know really like to do juicing and really are interested in composting, and talk with them about we how they can help contribute in the garden. And it's really fun to see students start bringing in their food scraps to add to our compost bins. We hold the garden open, do open houses during school events, and try and make sure that that is an open and welcome opportunity for any parents that hear about the garden and want to come in. I'm also make very specific goals to try and share all that we do in the garden, documented through pictures. I get it into newsletters. I make sure that it's in our school newspaper. It will be featured in things that are going home to parents. Our student high school Garden Club runs an Instagram account for the garden. And so I like to post there when I can, and also encourage the students to post. Their posts are really fantastic. So it's a really cool tool to share what's going on in the garden on a day-by-day basis. And then another way that I try to engage parents indirectly is I send food home with students and encourage them to take something home and share with their families. And I'm always saving my plastic containers from berries and peppers and things to bring into the garden. So I always have a clean supply of containers to encourage kids to take things home. And then what you see here on the right was our vermicompost station. The kids are tending to it. So they're adding their food scraps in there and seeing how learning to feed the worms. So volunteer recruitment, I tell everyone and anyone about the garden. Most people I find are incredibly excited about it. They want to help. And the most common thing they tell me is that they don't have a green thumb and they've killed everything they've ever grown. To which I say, no problem. There are about 1 million different ways that people can help in the garden. Anywhere, construction and irrigation services are fantastic. Anyone who wants to help throw an event, do cooking with students who are interested, anybody's interested in insects and want to help install insect houses, all of that is fantastic. Anyone who's an artist, to help paint signs. And again, I have all of our students do this, but this would be something that in another garden model, having parents who are artistic and want to do that would be a fantastic way to engage them. I try to be as very specific as I can about what I need for people because I respect their time that they can give. They want to know how they can help. And it may be, a specific person is a really great fit for a particular role. Sign Up Genius is the way that I would organize any of the volunteer activities and supply donations to make sure that we don't get 15 wheelbarrows and, in one pair of garden gloves when we do a supply drive. And then I would encourage you, if you don't have a steady supply of labor, as I do, to reach out and talk with your IVAS Extension office. I have a fantastic one, they're very supportive, but there's so many community organizations, Boy Scout groups looking for projects, college students. There's probably more people than you think that will want to come and help in your garden if they just had the opportunity and they knew that it was out there. So ways to think about when you actually have people to come into your garden. And again, because our model is a little bit differently, my big work days are student work days, but it operates the exact same way. If you have students working or you have parents or community members, the way you want to sort of think about it is planning and outlining exactly what's going to happen for your big work days. So as an example of this in our Pineview garden, the last day before winter break, I had 5 different classes come through back to back throughout the day. And so that is an example of a big work day because I had about 75 students coming through. And to do that, I had to have a very clear plan of what we were doing broken down by time. And all of my supplies needed to be there on site. So thinking about all your planting, your compost, your tools, your mulch, your seeds, all of your stuff sort of laid out and organized. I would highly recommend having a good plan written out. So it's not just in your head, because once things start going, it's very easy to forget when you've got 15 people asking you questions. I highly recommend getting a designated photographer of one of your adults in the garden that can take photographs throughout the day, because once you get going, it's very difficult to remember to take pictures, and those are what everybody is incredibly happy to see afterwards, including a group photo of everybody who participated, and the before and afters are always fantastic marketing for your garden. I also encourage cleanup at designated points throughout the day. In the example of when I've got 5 different classes, I have every class cleaning up before they leave so that it's not all left to the end of the day when everybody's exhausted and are fleeing the site. So encourage that. ultimately, at the end of the day, having a follow-up plan of how, what did you do? How did it contribute to the garden, and giving thanks for everybody who put out their time. So that's a big work day for us. They have those at Pineview School pretty much every week. I do a series of classes. So planning in advance is really, really important to make sure I've got everything on site that I need. I do routine small work days, which is almost every day. So again, those are our maintenance days, and I have a task list that is posted every day for students coming in. That would be the same thing if you had parents who wanted to drop in and help you with it. Things like weeding, pruning, watering, small, planting when you've got things that need to go in, and inspecting plants for insect or pest damage. That stuff every day, keeping a list of that, and then having job aids to show how to do different things. Things like brewing your compost tea, if that's something you do in your garden, having that laid out, how to mix potting soil. Those are all good things that people will ask how to do, and you will explain time and time again. So writing it all out one time and having it posted is a really easy tool to do. Moving on.
Yeah, thanks so much, Leslie. Just wanted to make note that we are just a little past 4:30, and I think you've covered like a lot of really great ideas for what to do in advance and day of and follow-up. And so just wondering if we could kind of move on to our wrap up, but if you have anything to add that you'd like to in our Q&A time, or just if people want to know more about your model, that would be great to share, if that's okay.
Absolutely.
Okay. Thank you so much. It really is amazing what you're doing in your program. Yeah, so with that, we can highlight some of this other stuff in other ways. And of course, the PowerPoint will be available in PDF form after, after the session. We'll email it out to you so you won't miss any of the details. I would definitely go back and read, some of what we've written on the slides here, especially kind of keeping it in your notes. But we want to progress into our Q&A and networking time. And we can dive deeper into some of the topics that you all are interested in discussing. But if you do need to leave right now, we definitely respect that, but we ask that you would complete our session survey prior to leaving. So just fill out that survey. And if you're interested in professional development, we have a separate survey for that as well. That way we can send you a certificate of completion. We have a Facebook group, and we can, post some of these resources and stories and spotlights on the Facebook group as well, so you don't miss a thing. And of course, a Google Drive folder where all of the resources and handouts and links are housed for you to go back to in the future as you continue your garden program. So again, thank you so much for joining us today. We will be back on Thursday, February 24th at 3:30 to 5 for perennial and pollinator party. So we're definitely looking forward to that new topic, and we will just continue right along into this networking and Q&A time. And I think there was quite a bit of questions that came through in the chat. So excited to address them and, explore some of the various things from Leslie and Tiffany as well.
Hello, everyone. I wanted to say thank you to our speakers and everybody who presented. My name's Bretton Homewood, and I'll be going over the questions that were asked here. And I think we have everybody ready to start answering them, right? Is everybody on standby there, ready to go from our team? So
Yeah.
Perfect. Okay, so the first question that came in earlier was about seed saving. Does the jar need to be in a dark spot?
So yeah, I'll handle that one if no one's posed. That's the ideal location. Light for some species can diminish the embryo or the baby plant, so it makes the seeds less viable. So ideally you want somewhere dark, cool, room temperature is okay. What would not be acceptable would be like the trunk of your car. I've had people do that. That gets hot, temperature varies throughout the year. You want stable, dark conditions. So yes, dark place.
Perfect. Thank you for that answer there. Our next question came in about, let's see, the wet and fermentation process. How long do seeds need to dry for?
All right, so that's a good question. And I did rush through that, so I do apologize. Seeds need to dry for a minimum of 2 weeks. The seeds that I use for our seed bank here in Manatee County, I normally dry for 3 to 4 weeks. That's just to ensure that they reach a certain moisture threshold. That way they're not sprouting or rotting during the storage process. So about 2 weeks for most people.
Okay, I think we got another question here for you on this. So at the wet and fermentation process, how do you know the fermentation process is complete when using that process?
Okay, so there's 2 things you're going to look for, and we'll use tomatoes because that's what most people will be doing. Cucumbers would be another example of ones that you could use fermentation with. Same principle. It's usually 3 to 4 days. You'll notice this white, nasty film that grows on top, right? It looks gross. It's not appealing. It doesn't smell super great. But once that 3 to 4 days is done, you'll see a lot of the seeds have sunk to the bottom of the container, right? They no longer have this gelatinous coating. You'll rinse them off to determine whether that coating is still present. If it is, you'll ferment them for another day or 2. Now, you can go too much. So if you do, let's say 6 or 7 days or a week, a lot of those seeds are going to begin to sprout. Why? Because they no longer have this coating, right? So 3 to 4 days, white film, you're going to check it. In most instances, those seeds will be at the bottom of the container. Once they're rinsed, you're going to put them on wax paper, not newspaper. I learned the hard way. They stick. Wax paper, let them dry for 2 weeks, and then you can store them.
Good to know on the wax paper versus the newspaper there. So, well, let's see. Moving on here, we got about insects with seeds here. So insects just within each individual seed and not with the plant overall, correct? That was a question asked earlier. So I guess what they're getting at is if a plant is infested, you can still salvage some seeds from it.
There's some variables here, and not to get into too much detail in this question, because I don't know, imagine anyone is an advanced seed saver here or anything like, or plant doctor for that matter. But typically if a plant is heavily infested, there are other factors contributing to that stress, which are going to produce poor quality seed. Or there are viruses being transmitted through these feeding insects, which are now systemic or a part of that seed. So if that's the case, those seeds would not be a good one to save. There are also seed-borne pests. So the weevils are a really good example. So if you ever try and save black-eyed peas or beans, for instance, there's a weevil that will pierce the pod. You'll see a hole on the pod, and then you'll see individual larvae in each of those bean seeds. And those seeds, unfortunately, are no longer viable, or if you choose to store them, those adults emerge and now they're in with all their food they infest those seeds there. So if you're seeing plants with lots of bugs on them or pest insects, like literally infested, they're distorted, they're not looking great, you don't want to select seeds from them too. So that's part of the process too, is selecting healthy, vigorous plants to save seed from. You don't want, I know it's kind of brutal and Darwinian, but you don't want weak or not performing plants because you're choosing those genetics for the next one.
So it looks like we kind of have a follow-up question here from Peter Murphy about how long his seeds need to be in the wet paper towel for, I guess, to start the germination process, if I'm reading that right.
So Kelly, you did the germination test, so that one's you.
Yeah, I mean, the kind of a good practice is to check your seeds at least every 2 days. You know, you can, it depends on how long, like what type of seed that you're germinating. They have different numbers of days that it might be expected to germinate, but regularly checking on them, and also to make sure that your paper towel isn't drying out, that it's staying moist is really important. I practiced yesterday with this, and my paper towel was totally dry when I went back this morning. And so you're going to want to re-wet that, make sure that it stays moist. And yeah, so you just want to check on it. But if it's over a week and a half or so, and nothing's happening, you probably have dead seeds.
And another method you could try is, so I did this with one of my batches, just to experiment. You could soak them in water, like standing water for, I've read up to 9 hours is preferable. So maybe just overnight, right before you go to bed, and then in the morning, drain them off and then put them in the wet paper towel. And then that might expedite the process too, if you're trying to get seeds like to experiment with in the classroom, for example.
Oh, very good. So we have kind of a question comment here that but I think it's a good one to ask, especially in light of all the closures we've been having and things like that. At least that's how I read this question. I'm having a lot of problems finding seeds for planting. Also, because students have been sick, my garden is taking a long time to be settled. Do you all have any advice for that?
So for me personally, seeds for a while were tricky to get. I'll give you that. Especially at the beginning of the whole shutdown and everything, seeds were kind of flying out the window because everyone and their mother was doing backyard victory gardens again, right? That was popular for a little minute. An easy way, and honestly, it's kind of silly, but you can go into the grocery store. Now, you're not going to have a lot of selection, but the example today with the lima beans, those are perfectly viable seeds, right? They're a variety that was selected for its commercial value, right? That we eat it, it's disease resistance typically, maybe not the tastiest thing, but they're viable seeds. So you can do lima beans that way, you can get black-eyed peas that way. Alternatively, if you're comfortable shopping online, there are several vendors that will sell seeds to you as well. There's Baker Creek Heirloom, there's Seed Savers Exchange, there's Southern Exposure Seed is another company, and they all have a lot of heirloom or open pollinated varieties. And if you can recall in the presentation, that's what I would recommend that you work with versus buying a hybrid plant, because you can purchase seeds as hybrids as well. Typically, they're designated as F1. It'll say that on the seed packet somewhere, or it'll say hybrid. For example, Sun Gold is a tomato, delicious, right? Super good if you've never had it, but it's a hybrid. So saving seeds from it is not recommended because those seeds have unpredictable traits. We don't know what they will be. Versus a Cherokee Purple, if in isolation with another Cherokee Purple, we can say, well, we save seeds from here. These are very likely, or with high confidence, going to be another Cherokee Purple. So I would try the grocery store first. Lowe's and Home Depot are okay on occasion, depending on your region. And then, of course, you have your online vendors if you're comfortable doing that.
Really good advice, especially now. Even in my own current job, I noticed I had trouble finding seeds. So thank you for the tips there. But I had to shop around. I was able to find some, but anyways, okay, so moving on, we have another question here. What are the best seeds to put into the glove for the gardening in the glove activity?
Yeah, so I found that, it depends on, are you doing this for a classroom activity just to see and learn about germination, maybe learn about the parts of the plant, which are parts of the seed, which I didn't really go over, but, looking at a poster like this where you can actually start to see the first leaves, the stem, and the root system all inside of the seed once it does germinate and sprout. So if you're trying to do it for that purpose, I would say things like, lettuce and carrots and smaller seeds are fine in terms of like keeping in the glove. But if you want to then transplant them out into the garden, something bigger like a bean or a pea would be preferable. So again, thinking about that, like, what would you normally direct transplant versus is a little bit less stressed when you take it out. But really, this is more of an activity to learn about germination. So they're probably going to stay in the glove. So I would say just have fun with it.
Good deal. We got another chat question here from Jennifer about, does anyone know if you can get into trouble seed saving at all, as far as like with patents or things like that? I think of like Monsanto seeds or something
Mhm.
weird like that that comes to mind, for instance, for myself, but.
Yeah, so as a homeowner, okay, so homeowners or residences, typically you won't encounter trademarked plants. However, if you do, those seeds or those plants will usually have that designation on their tag or their label somewhere. Those would be prohibited from being propagated. So for example, if you were to use Monsanto, those are proprietary seeds, right? They've done something to those seeds. They've put in the work to create that variety, and that's the expectation, is that they maintain that. Versus a lot of your heirlooms have been grown by peoples, right? A group of people or a culture or a region for at least 50 years. That's the definition of an heirloom. So sticking with those avoids trademarks. Avoiding hybrids also avoids trademarks, because sometimes they can be in that patent as well. But typically, if you're staying away from things that have a TM on them, right? A Mystic Spire salvia is a trademarked plant, right? That has a designation on it. So you couldn't propagate that plant, for instance. But a Cherokee purple is fair game. Everyone can do that. It's an heirloom. Yeah, I see that. Didn't want to get in trouble. Sure thing. Just avoid trademarks at all costs, because that is where it gets a little tricky, especially if you're a farmer.
Absolutely. We have, oh, here we go. Here we have a question from Selena about, has anyone here had experience saving seeds in the past, or does anyone plan to save seeds from a garden crop this year? If yes, what kinds of crops are you have saved?
So I'm always saving seeds, if that's not clear. Yeah, I think some of you have even participated in classes that I've taught on seed saving. So I do a lot of seed saving in Manatee County. In fact, we have a seed bank here that I've been operating since 2018. So we're always saving seeds, and school gardens are a really good opportunity for me to do so. So we typically do a fall and winter crop, and each school will get an heirloom and work on that heirloom to save seed for themselves. But then I also get a little for the seed bank to maintain that variety. So we did Louisiana green eggplants in the fall. We did lollipop tomatoes, which were super easy. We've done cowhorn peppers. We've done pinto beans. We've done cocoa blue beans, all these funny, weird things. Easy to seed save, right? If you're isolating, and then the kids really enjoy that part. So we all year. And right now we're getting ready to do mustards. Super easy. You'll have more mustard seeds than you could ever want. So that's one to start with for sure.
I see a hand raise from Emily, and then we have a couple questions related to the seed bank, it looks like, after that.
Yeah, so fun story about, this is from last season. I got this really nice kind of like insect mix from Southern Seed Exchange, planted it, and I had amaranth in it, which is this kind of big, beautiful, red, stocky, almost like flowering. I'm pretty sure you can save the seeds and convert it into almost like a type of grain. I didn't do that though, but someone else at my garden really loved them. So I gifted her, once it was grown, the full amaranth plant, and she saved those seeds, and her amaranth this year has grown a lot better. So it was just kind of a cool, just within our own little community garden, seeing a plant that she really loved. I gifted it to her. She did the seed saving, and this year she's got beautiful growing amaranth.
Very cool. Well, it looks like, so Peter had I guess, two questions I can tie together here. Are there any free seeds? I think that was related to the seed bank there, or can you buy said seeds? And it looks like Lily had that same question. Do you sell seeds from your seed bank?
So the seed bank is a membership model. And for me and for my program, that makes sense. It's a cost. There's a cost associated with the acquiring of the seeds, and then the maintenance and the storing and the labels and all that fun stuff. But I'll tell you, it's minute fee. It's $10 a year. It's honestly nothing. And that gets you 12 varieties for our particular seed bank. Now, depending on where you live in the state, there are libraries that can offer free seed exchanges. So there's a possibility that there are free seeds out there. Maybe your extension office through your Master Gardener program, sometimes they offer seeds, either vegetable or butterfly plants. You can work with local non-for-profits. So around here we have Hope Seeds, which is one, and they tend to donate a lot of seeds to the community as well. So really it just depends on your region. But I would encourage, if you have seed savers in your area, maybe get together and start to form something, or at least come together for a seed swap, because it brings you closer to people who share that value with you, but it also gives you the opportunity to share those stories, right? Seeds are storytellers. So it gives you the opportunity to tell about your seeds and where they come from, and for someone else to share those seeds with you.
Very cool.
And I also just wanted to highlight that Miami Seed Share, if anyone is in Miami, they are a free public resource making seed libraries happen in Miami. So not only did Miami Seed Share make this amazing video where you can see everything we're talking about seed saving visually, but you can also get seeds through their Seed Share. And Mindy also said that Lee County has Echo and they have a seed bank, and they also have some of the seeds for sale from some of the vendors that Mac mentioned, and from of the seeds that they grow out themselves.
Very good. I wanted to comment for Coral here, who messaged about the certificate survey link, and anyone who needs that link, it's in the chat right now. And we got a comment here about having hummingbird tree seeds galore. So glad to see that. And then, okay, is there a place where you can find those seed libraries from Becky there?
So Brendan, it looks like Lily shared this
Gotcha.
website in here. Yeah, in case anyone wants to check it out. Definitely get connected with your extension office. So MAC is located in the Manatee extension. So Lily, I happen to know you're in the area. So get connected with MAC, or we also have an old card catalog at the Sarasota extension office that got converted into a seed library. And it's got all the cute little old card catalog areas for seeds, and it's in the main extension area. So long as we're open, which is like Monday through Friday, kind of regular business hours, you can come and take the seeds that you need. So I would encourage for those of you in other parts of the state to get connected with your extension office, because you never know what's going on with them and what they have. Like Max said, it's $10 for the year, which is way less than I have spent on seeds, or you can get them, for free. So.
Thank you. That's such good information.
Very good. Well, let's see. I don't see any extra questions. I have a couple questions here to ask, but I wanted to leave the floor open in case we missed anything, or if anybody had any extra questions here.
Yeah, and I was also interested, related to some of what we discussed related to parent engagement and volunteer recruitment. If you all had thoughts or ideas about what you do to engage parents or manage volunteers in the garden. This space is really to learn from each other. So wanted to put that out there as well.
Any takers from our panel there? Lily?
I'll throw something out there. Whenever I put together gardening events, it's been really helpful to have music going on. Music and snacks. People love music. There's a lot of, there's music about gardening, music about permaculture, with just a really good feeling to it. So that helps rally people together.
I was going to mention, I like to make task cards that have the name of the task on it and just a brief description and how many people I think would be good for that particular task, so that a group can pick up the card and say, okay, we got this one. So it makes it easy to sort.
I love those ideas. I also was thinking about how many times I've done the seed necklace activity at an event or a celebration, because it's nice to have something for students to kind of take home and remember the day by and kind of reinforce those garden concepts that they learned about. And also thinking about having stations is really helpful so that it's not so chaotic. So in addition to those cards, like this could be its own station when you need a break from maybe more manual labor and things like that. So having a variety.
Well, very good. What is everybody growing this season? Any highlights of what you all are growing this season?
Collards for me. That's my thing right there. Yeah. We're growing a lot of collards. We're doing Alabama blue collards this winter. So kids are really enjoying that.
I'm seeing some lettuce and radishes. Also in the chat, I see some butterfly gardens. Sun gold tomatoes. That sounds great. Stepping up the blackberry game. Very nice. Tomato, lettuce, peppers, pumpkins. Very cool. Let's see, turmeric, Everglades tomatoes, rainbow chard, lots of herbs, papaya. Okay. I had trouble with papaya in North Florida. I'd get the tree to grow and everything, but the fruit never would mature fast enough for me. Carrots. Yeah, Florida's great. You can grow a lot of stuff here. Very cool. So how do you, well, go ahead.
I was going to ask if I could share about the seed viewer because it kind of relates to what we're growing right now.
Sure.
So one little hack that I wanted to share. So the seed viewer activity is really just, looking at seeds growing in a cup, a transparent environment so that you can see the whole root system develop in a bigger container than the small Ziploc bag. So you just take some cardboard and put it around the outside of the cup, and then a wet paper towel in the center to continuously water, and then put your seeds around the perimeter. But the hack that I wanted to show you that's relevant to spring gardening is this was originally a regular size cup, anything, iced coffee, whatever it is that you get anywhere. And I cut the top off, and the top is actually useful to prevent cutworms. So you might be doing that in your garden anyway, and just wanted to share that because then you don't have to waste another product and you're saving a little time. And then to prevent kids getting cut or anything like that, we can just put some tape around the edge and make sure to label it with your name and date.
Looks like Peter mentioned that he had trouble getting his Everglades tomato seeds, had germination problems with them. Does anyone have any advice on what to do if in general, really, if you put a seed in the ground and it has trouble coming up, and you don't have luck germinating? Is there a kind of troubleshoot you'd give to someone on that way to solve that?
Yeah, so my best practice, if you will, first is botanically mature fruits. So ensure that the fruits were mature. For Everglades tomato, it's pretty easy, right? They turn red. And that's unusual that you're having issues with them germinating because they're just kind of prolific little things. It could be the environmental conditions that they're present in are not ideal currently. I mean, it's cool out. The tomatoes don't really like to germinate very well in cool weather. If you're sowing them in trays, perhaps try a seed mix with a heating mat under. That's a pretty good idea this time of year too. They sell them really inexpensively on Amazon or Lowe's or Home Depot. They're like 14 bucks. Change your life. I use it all the time, especially in the winter, or even when I want to germinate crops that take a while. So peppers take up to 20 days sometimes, but you can speed that process up by adding heat. So a heat pad, good quality soil starter for seeds, right? Don't use potting soil or anything, seed mix, and then try them under a grow light with a dome. So you're giving humidity, you're giving moisture, you're giving heat, all in that same environment let's trick them into growing when we want them, manipulate them that way they germinate for you, because it's unusual that they wouldn't.
Yeah, the heat really stuck out to me when you said that, because then the first thing I thought was how cold it's been lately. So, well, we're at 5 o'clock now. So, in respect to everyone's time here, I'll yield the floor to Kelly if there's anything else she has to say. And thank you everybody for the questions and the answers.
All I have to say is a hearty thank you to everyone here, to our guest presenters, for all of the time and dedication that you've put into what you shared today, and also for what you do every day in the community. So thank you so much for being here and for just spreading gardens throughout Florida. It makes a difference, especially in the lives of our students. So please, if you haven't gotten a chance, please take the survey to tell us what you think and how we could improve. We do take your comments into account, and we look forward to seeing you on February 24th.